Listen closely. Do you hear this sound?
I think it definitely falls in the realm of like auditory uncanny valley.
Didn't feel like it was coming up out of the ground. It just felt like it was there.
Sounds like it's coming from the windows. I know it's outside. Gotta be outside.
You can't escape it, and it's like a low, rumbling, sub-bass tone.
Statistically, on average, for every 50 people that you meet, at least one of them will hear a creepy, mysterious, phantom sound with utterly no explanation of its origin. And this is not a new thing. If you're not already familiar with the hum, strap yourself in, because this is easily the weirdest, most widely witnessed phenomenon in the entire world. And this isn't something like ghosts or aliens. There are hundreds of thousands of people hearing this sound right now. Some people have completely abandoned their homes to escape it, and some people have been so troubled by the sound that they've taken their own life. This is very real. I've heard it. I have recordings of it, and I've spent years, thousands of hours, and a small fortune trying to figure out what could possibly be going on here. And in the long process of making this video, we maybe have gotten a little bit closer to finally having an answer to that question. So let's dive right in. Intense. This is it. This is the sound. I heard it for the first time in an abandoned mall parking lot in the middle of the night. We were taking infrasonic measurements in a small Louisiana town that was completely frozen solid and shut down due to a freak winter storm. Cameron, or the artist and YouTuber Venus Theory, was with me, and he heard it too. We both recorded it, and we both felt it louder than we heard it, if that makes any sense. It's as if the sound was a higher harmonic of what was vibrating our chests. More on this later. I just wanted you to hear what it is that we're referring to in this video.
Constant low bass sound like a car radio driving by with loud bass constantly. Symptoms: headache, insomnia, nausea, sense of vibration, anxiety. And then a low rumble under that. Headache, insomnia, nausea, anxiety. A 21-year-old describing low pulsating noise like an idling engine. Headache, insomnia, nausea, sense of vibration, anxiety.
Whether we're trying to get to the bottom of something objectively or just trying to start a video, we should probably establish where the hum began. And while I've found a few broader mentions of the acoustic phenomenon dating back to 18th century literature, the first real trace of a long-term, consistent hum that I could find was in a paper published in 1973 titled "Loudness and Annoyance Due to Low Frequency Sound." Right after that, there was an article in an issue of New Scientist speculating that some people may be hearing the jet stream. A month later, the Albuquerque Tribune describes something alarmingly familiar 51 years later. A low, throbbing sound, inaudible to everyone else around. In Britain, throughout the 1970s, hundreds of residents of Bristol reported hearing a deep rumble at night to the city council. In 1974, this gem appeared in a syndicated comic called Frontiers of Science. It reads, when a woman in the UK threatened to commit suicide because of the noises no one else could hear, her local health authority called a noise expert. He went to her house and could hear nothing unusual but recorded the nothing on analysis. The tape showed a peak in the background between 30 and 40 hertz. More reports came in, until more than 50 people were complaining of a low throbbing noise that no one else could hear. Within a few years, thousands of people across the United Kingdom complained about hearing the hum. More researchers studied it and managed to record it, and in the next 10 years, there would be over a dozen published studies verifying the existence of the hum while being unable to find the source. By 1989, the Low Frequency Noise Sufferers Association was established, and hum hearers in Britain would routinely attend meetings. Meanwhile, across the pond in Newton Square, Pennsylvania, a suburb of Philadelphia, residents heard a low hum that woke them up from sleep and caused headaches, fatigue, and queasiness. This went on for years, and in 1981, the EPA suspected that it could be caused by microwaves, and eventually started lending residents tools to measure electromagnetic fields. While things like jet streams and microwaves were more or less ruled out by researchers, this was hardly the beginning, as the hum was about to get a lot more famous. In the early 1990s, close to 11% of the residents in the isolated town of Taos, New Mexico were hearing the hum. Some residents were even moving out as a result of it. Naturally, conspiracy theories started popping up, and this ominous, creepy sound would put Taos on the map in both the national news and even pop culture.
Imagine being plagued by this sound. A loud, annoying hum that grinds away incessantly, day after day, night after night.
Electrical nerve gas, or maybe behind the so-called Taos hum.
While the Taos hum became by far the most reported on and notable localized case of this phenomenon, researchers from Los Alamos National Laboratory were unable to record or even detect it. I traveled to New Mexico to meet with my friend Mark, who is the perfect combination of open-minded and rational. It doesn't hurt that Mark also has extensive experience with sound and audio, and it certainly helps that Mark is a hum hearer. Well, not hearer, feeler. I'll let him explain.
Went out to near the gorge, the Rio Grande Gorge out there, and about 4 o'clock in the morning, no airplanes flying over, no traffic on the road, really in the middle of nowhere. I can't say that I heard it. I felt it. You know, it's like you can feel it in your chest, and it was faint. It wasn't like it was, really jarring to me. You know, I know some of the people had been really affected with dizziness and sickness and that sort of stuff, and I didn't feel that at all. But there was definitely something vibrating. And so again, that was about 1992.
You hear it outside of Taos, like you hear it in this area as well?
Yeah, so, here in Corrales, I've felt that same sort of thing late at night when everything else quiets down, and have only felt it inside my house. I can pick it up occasionally. It's not a constant thing. I don't hear it every night.
That evening, my crew and I spent the night in Taos, and while none of us specifically heard or felt the hum, we all did sleep very poorly, and I blame it on the altitude. But not experiencing the hum wasn't surprising, as there aren't nearly as many reports these days as there were in the 1990s.
My impression was that some of the people who were so bothered by it, all the physical sensations and stuff, they left because they couldn't stand it anymore.
We decided to pay the gorge a visit, and the surrounding area is no joke in the winter, especially in a van. The footage just can't do the gorge justice. It looks as if the earth just cracked open the entrance to an abyss. I wanted to take infrasonic and seismograph measurements all around the area, most notably on the 600-foot high, 1,280-foot long Rio Grande Gorge Bridge. So back to that little theory I had. When first studying the landscape of the area, I thought to myself, that gorge looks like a great source of concentrated wind, and that giant steel bridge looks like a great resonator or an unintentional wind harp. And all that relatively hollow volcanic rock sure seems like a good amplifier for a town just 10 miles down the road. And guess what? Unsurprisingly, there was higher infrasonic activity both on the bridge and around the gorge. Is that causing the infamous Taos hum? I don't know. It's still very, very inconclusive, and I would honestly be surprised if this hypothesis of mine wasn't already tested by somebody else. And that still doesn't help the millions of people around the world that are currently experiencing the same phenomenon. But there is a whole lot more hum out there. In the 1990s, people started hearing it just northeast of Boston, then in various rural communities in Vermont. The hum became locally famous in Hueytown, Alabama. The next big hum epicenter would be in Kokomo, Indiana in 2001. Some of the residents literally just up and abandoned their homes, while others said that they could sit on their back porch and see dried leaves vibrating on the ground. Experts speculated that it was a large fan in a nearby factory, but after adjustments were made, the hum remained for many of the residents. Over the next decade, large clusters of people reported it in southwest Germany, British Columbia, various towns in Scotland. In 2012, a couple living near Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, claimed that the hum caused a descent into diagnosed psychosis accompanied by self-harm and attempted suicide. Researchers recorded the sound at over 60 decibels inside their home. There's a wide selection of groups for hum hearers on social media, and I've been a member of a lot of them, some of them for almost a decade. And between my survey data and the rigorous research of Dr. Glenn McPherson, I've been looking at and analyzing data from over 8,000 people who experience this phenomenon. The amount of data is staggering and frankly kind of overwhelming.
I receive a mass of emails. I'm absolutely inundated.
Glenn has been actively, closely researching the hum for decades, and in 2012 he started a blog that would later grow into the World Hum Map and Database, which has since collected nearly 20,000 map points and an absolute wealth of information. One attribute that I absolutely cherish about Glenn is his commitment to logic and asking some honestly really difficult questions. Some of those questions you may have even had while watching this video, such as, could this be mass hysteria? Could this be tinnitus? Could this be something that is caused by poor mental health? I've spoken to hundreds of hum hearers, and it is hard for me to not be defensive of them personally, but it is a valid question, and none of those people I've spoken to will get any relief from the hum if we can't define if and how it exists.
If I can give you some intriguing results, here's some things we have discovered. People with a family history of autism and ADHD, they're greatly overrepresented in the data. People who are fully ambidextrous, they're like 5 to 6 to 1 overrepresented in the data. If you go into the Times of London Archive, I really look forward to hearing what a researcher with enough time can come up with, because there is a possibility that the hum has been with us since time immemorial. And if that's the case, then the only thing that's changed is our awareness of it.
Exhaustively, for months, I went through archive after archive, searching through every possible word and combination of words to find out when this whole thing started. And there were two notable mentions. The Ghost Choir of Roan Mountain in eastern Tennessee haunted travelers and nearby residents for centuries. Ultimately, it turned out to be a combination of wind and Appalachian folklore. Then in 1960, seemingly out of nowhere, allegedly over 500,000 people described hearing a low humming sound in London. There were a lot of theories, but ultimately it just seemingly went away and people went on with their lives. But the constant hum that we're studying seems to have mostly started in the 1970s, and in the early 90s, it was the humaissance. If you dig deep enough into any region in America or Britain, you'll likely find reports of the hum from that era. So what happened?
I'm now being a little bit more open about what my speculation is. Now, for example, there are certain antibiotics that for some people, if you take them after 2 doses, you're permanently deaf. Was there a medication that was over-the-counter / prescription in England, then came to America, a certain number of years afterward?
Is it the safest fever reducer?
It's ibuprofen.
Yeah.
Now, even simple aspirin can be autotoxic for some people.
Right.
Why is it that tinnitus goes back to human history, but the hum starts some point in the 60s, mid to late 60s, possibly early 70s? Why?
Firstly, just repeating this as a disclaimer, this is one of Glenn's many speculations that he gave me when I was pestering him for things to try and rule out, and it's a pretty damn good speculation. So ibuprofen, like most anti-inflammatories, can be ototoxic, especially with prolonged use. From what I've been able to dig up, while not perfect, the timelines do share a correlation. Ibuprofen was not approved for over-the-counter use in the UK or USA until the early 80s, but more importantly, in the USA, it wasn't approved to be sold without supervision of a pharmacist until 1995. But after that, you could pick up an Advil just like you would other pain relievers like Tylenol or aspirin at a gas station or a corner shop, and ibuprofen quickly became synonymous with pain relief. Even then, in 1996, ibuprofen's market share averaged around 2.5% compared to Tylenol or paracetamol's 45%. What's actually more correlated, in my opinion at least, is how pain relief in general shifted in the late 1980s and early 1990s, which is ultimately what led to the opioid crisis. Before then, if you had chronic back pain or headaches, you'd see a doctor and the doctor would try and find a cure. Pain management was only the first option for severe cases or end-of-life care. In the late 80s and early 90s, people just started taking a whole lot more drugs in general, and it became hard to find a home that didn't have a bottle of over-the-counter pain pills in the cabinet. If we're looking at cases in localized clusters, turning this speculation into a theory would require ignoring a whole lot of evidence. The hum has been detected and recorded hundreds, if not thousands of times. I've heard it myself. Without question, in those cases, that rules out otoacoustic emissions, or the sound that a lot of people hear when they yawn, or hysteria, or mental illness. One thing is for certain, there is no shortage of theories. TACAMO is a U.S. military communication system that was designed to withstand a nuclear attack. It uses ELF, or extremely low frequency broadcast sites, and the timeline of deployment almost perfectly aligns with hum reports from the 1960s to present day. My problem with this theory is that TACAMO isn't thought to be a constant broadcast of pressure waves. During tests or drills, you would have a huge influx of hum reports and very few outside of those periods. Furthermore, while TACAMO is designed to work around the world, disturbances would still have a pattern based on the location of the broadcaster. So I don't buy it. Another popular theory in the 1990s and 2000s has been HAARP, which is a military broadcast station in Alaska that has been associated with conspiracies ranging from everything from weather manipulation to triggering earthquakes to mind control. While HAARP in the past has allegedly attempted to bounce ELF waves off of the ionosphere, research has shut down decades ago and the land and equipment was sold off to the University of Alaska in 2014. So probably not that either. Then there's Project Sanguine, which to me is probably the most digestible of the ELF theories due to its timeline. The military experimented with a 76 Hertz broadcast from locations in Wisconsin and Michigan with the intention of communicating to submarines. The facilities allegedly operated between 1989 and 2004, which does line up rather conveniently with the sudden uptick of reports in the United States in this period. But this still doesn't explain what people are hearing right now. And to our knowledge, this technology didn't get the same level of enthusiasm or military approval in the UK or any country within 1,000 miles of the UK. Back in the 1970s, there was a pretty popular hum theory or explanation speculating that perhaps a small percentage of the population could actually hear the jet stream. And when all of the hum hearer data was coming out of the United Kingdom, this actually was worth exploring, but here in the United States, the jet stream moves around quite a bit and changes drastically in speed. So you would probably have less people just hearing a constant hum all of the time, and you would have bigger peaks and valleys in severity of hum hearing. Another natural theory that I've come across quite a few times is the Schumann resonance, which is the frequency that the Earth resonates at, or the Earth's heartbeat, as some call it. Contrary to popular belief, it's not some steadfast frequency. It actually changes up and down based on water levels in the atmosphere, day-night cycles, solar activity. So the patterns would line up with hum reports, and they simply don't. Finally, there have been some confirmed natural explanations for causes of the hum in Seattle, Washington, and Sausalito, California, and it turned out to be the mating call of the midshipman fish. The males are not only bedazzled with these bioluminescent dots on their body, but they emit this really creepy low hum to attract females. I actually wanted to adopt a few for the purpose of this video, but here's another interesting fact about the midshipman fish. Some of them have venomous spines. So here's a video of them humming instead. They are just so weird, and unfortunately they don't really help us with our investigation here because they only exist on the Pacific coast of North America, and that doesn't explain the other 99% of hum reports. Anyway. Wind turbines and hydroelectric dams are frequent suspects among hum hearers, and a lot of these folks, understandably, are passionate about what they think might be causing the disturbance. And as if that wasn't enough passion, these particular things are often entangled with the weird American hyper-politicization of clean energy. I decided to avoid any of this additional bias and just collected data on my own, at times even renting houses nearby for a day and shutting off the power to them. In my research, I was unable to find any correlation with dams or wind turbines. In other cases, a lot of this research has been literally visiting people in their homes, cataloging their experiences, and then recording both acoustic and infrasonic frequencies. And to be honest, I kind of loved the experience of being people's traveling sound detective. Judy, for example, lived in one of the quietest homes I've ever been in, and she heard a sound that I simply couldn't hear or detect. She heard it in particular parts of the house, and shutting the power off to her home just made it more noticeable. Judy suspected that a large cell phone tower was causing the sound, as the timeline of its construction correlated almost perfectly with her symptoms. So I went to the cell phone tower and nearby transformers and found nothing unusual. I started entertaining the thought that it could be a type of resonance from the drainage or sewer pipes in her subdivision. A few months after visiting Judy, I acquired access to a much more detailed database of oil and natural gas pipelines. As luck would have it, she was living less than 700 feet away from a major oil pipeline that runs over 30 miles. It's also probably worth mentioning that the company that owns the pipeline has paid over $5 million in environmental violations in the last 3 years alone. If you follow me on social media, or if you're a longtime subscriber to my YouTube channel, then you've probably seen me fooling around with pipes at some point. Pipes are obviously extremely resonant and can create a wide variety of unintentional tones. Surely, at some point in your life, you've turned on a water tap before and heard the pipe squeak or groan inside the wall, and this type of sound in a household is something that plumbers are commonly called to troubleshoot. So naturally, this makes anything involving tubes or pipes a suspect when it comes to trying to find a localized source of the hum. Now, water, plumbing, and sewage infrastructure has existed in some form or another as far back as ancient Egypt, so it probably wouldn't help explain the drastic increase of hum reports starting in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Here's my big theory. Ready? High-pressure natural gas pipelines are packed with as much as 1,500 pounds per square inch of internal pressure. In comparison, the combustion pressure of a Lamborghini engine is about 150 psi. The gas travels long distances through these pipelines using pressure differentials between compressor stations, and this pressure is typically centrifugal, or spinning around the edges away from the center. Not only could that centrifugal pressure oscillate the pipe itself, but it heats up the molecules so much that coolers are needed downstream from the compressors. A Ryoka tube is an excellent way to demonstrate what happens when you drastically change the temperature and pressure differential inside of a pipe. And all I had to do was put some metal screen in here that I'm going to now heat up. Now let's create that pressure differential by turning it right side up. Now imagine how that would have sounded if this pipe were 48 inches in diameter and about 40 miles long. Yup. If you look at an operational timeline of high-pressure natural gas pipelines in the United States and the United Kingdom, there is definitely some pretty strong correlation. And on top of that, if you take hum hearers and subtract population density, the chances of a hum report being near a natural gas main line increases. The National Transmission System powered on their natural gas pipelines throughout Britain in the late 1960s, and sure enough, a major cluster of them are routed near Bristol, then Warndon villages. A few years later, feeder pipelines would reach Scotland and eventually meet with the pipelines coming from the Friggs gas field on the east side of the country. Now in Indiana, while natural gas was a county over, the town of Kokomo does have a large private pipeline under it that carries fuel across the state. I couldn't locate the date it went into operation, but I could verify that it was up and running in 2001 when residents reported the hum. And then I found another one right next to that Philadelphia suburb of Newton Square, Pennsylvania. If there was a localized flurry of hum reports, chances are there's a recently deployed pipeline that needs ruling out. But one notable exception would be the most famous, Taos, New Mexico. There is a gas line, but it was built in the 1960s and then rerouted in 2014. The timing of the hum reports don't seem as correlated as a lot of the other places. At the risk of sounding a little bit conspiratorial, I've noticed that a wealth of research went into how pipelines might create sound that affects nearby communities in the early 1980s and prior to that. But since then, natural gas companies have become a lot more private and cagey. In fact, I've reached out to over a dozen of them for this video, and not one agreed to even share any technical or historical information with me. So we just packed up some equipment and went to the pipeline mecca, Texas and Louisiana. And sure enough, on the first night of the trip in Monroe, Louisiana, for the first time, we heard the hum loud and clear. A few weeks later, when going over the data, I looked at a map to see if we were near any high-pressure natural gas pipelines at the time, and yeah, it's safe to say that we were. It seems that in some places in Louisiana, there's more pipelines than not pipelines. Now, when it comes to shooting high-pressure liquids into the ground in search of natural gas, Texas has gone full YOLO. People who live near the Permian Basin have been experiencing earthquakes almost every single day as a result of this. In 2022, there were 9 times more earthquakes than just 5 years prior, some of them reaching 5.4 on the Richter scale, which is among the strongest ever felt in the entire state. Now, obviously, if you start placing infrasonic microphones in the middle of an oil field experiencing man-made earthquakes, you're not going to get much meaningful data about the subtle resonance of a pipeline. But about 400 miles east of those oil fields in Plano and Denton, Texas, I met with some friends who were hearing the hum and putting quite a lot of effort into getting to the bottom of its cause.
When we went into the living room, I don't know if you saw, we have a little bass trap up in the corner, and we were gonna start slowly buying bass traps to just put in the living room and see if that would help.
Almost every single person I've spoken to has turned off all the power in their house. Some people like straight up disconnecting it from like
the grid.
Yeah, like
it's interesting to me that other people have like done the like shut down all my power, shut down everything, and isolate, because like I'm an engineer for my job. So like for me, that was just like, oh, I'm going to troubleshoot.
Yeah.
Right. But like for regular folks who aren't engineers to be like, I'm going to do that. That to me is what makes that remarkable.
I always also assumed that maybe it was like an electrical problem. With the solar, they redid all the electricals throughout the house. Everything was then grounded properly. New cable ran for each of the outlets. The day that they finished the solar, everything had to be shut down for like a preliminary inspection. There was no electricity going throughout the entire house. And I just said, hey, stand over there and listen. And she looks at me and just goes, oh, that's what you've been hearing all these years? I was like, yes. We have the special hum. It's 2 tones. We have a higher pitch that is sort of like, it moves from A, 440, and sort of up and down a few semitones from there. And then there is a lower note that it's just incredibly loud and like you can't escape it, and it's like a low rumbling sub bass tone. You feel it like in your head.
Yeah.
Like behind your ears, sort of like in your neck, essentially. And it like turning your head and going to different places, even going outside, it's just always there. It's like it's blanketing wherever you are.
It's actually pretty loud right here.
All of these hum measurements are rather useless without a bunch of data in a control group to compare it to. Creating this baseline of averages is not very entertaining to watch, as it consists of me placing an infrasonic microphone and acoustic microphone in a location, then double checking the timestamps and GPS coordinates. I can then compare my infrasonic data to an open network of seismographic data, where I'll create a median average of the noise from each seismograph, then subtract it, and then see if a vibration that I picked up in, say, Louisiana is being caused by a seismic event happening in Alabama or offshore in the ocean. It's also important to capture control data from remote areas far away from things like traffic and urban infrastructure. If possible, it's generally useful to take a rock sample or note the precise location so you could have a good idea of the absorption coefficient of the earth surrounding the noise source. In my findings and tests, a porous, smooth volcanic rock actually acts a bit like a resonator on its own, and there's even some geological research that supports this. Ironically, the hum and a sense of unease was present in this particular remote area of the desert, which initially gave me a bit of excitement. Places like this make it easy to rule things out, and we soon realized that we were only a few miles away from a compressor station for a major pipeline, a pipeline that is operated by the same company as the one near Judy, some 1,800 miles away. If someone's takeaway from all of this is that the hum has been solved and high-pressure natural gas pipelines are the blame, that would be incorrect. I'm actually playing devil's advocate and attempting to collect data to rule out my pipeline hypothesis. That's ultimately how you get to the bottom of something. And it's not only my hypothesis. There are a lot of hum hearers who think that pipelines are the cause, full stop. Some of them are very dedicated. This is probably just the first time where there's been some field research put into that concept. And my personal theory is actually going to be a little bit frustrating. The hum may be caused by a combination of some of the things that you've seen in this video, or it may be caused by none of the things that you've seen in this video. But after years of analysis, I can tell you with a great deal of confidence that the hum is not being caused by one of these things. Dr. Glenn McPherson or any other scientist or researcher that I've consulted with about the hum have arrived to a similar conclusion. It's easy to blame one thing, but somebody living on top of a gas pipeline may also have constant autoacoustic emissions. Or perhaps somebody living in the middle of a giant wind farm may be hearing the hum from pipes in their house or horny fish in the sea nearby. If you're hearing the hum, the source is going to be localized and potentially complicated. There's something else that's really important to say. There's a chance that for some people, the hum is a type of tinnitus not widely recognized by medicine. There's a chance that for some people, it's a function of anxiety or even in rare cases, psychosis. If you hear the hum and it's one of those cases or anything similar to that, you are still hearing it. And if you hear it, it's real. Sound is just a psychoacoustic function. Many of the people who experience this phenomenon are scared to talk about it or look into the cause because they feel like they'll be seen as crazy. Some people hear the hum and don't mind it. Other people hear it and actually like it. It keeps them company, or it might be a religious experience for them. But if you hear the hum and you don't like hearing the hum and you want to stop hearing the hum, get your ears checked. Have a doctor look closely at your prescriptions. If you have any mental health issues, tell your doctor that the sound is bothering you. It being a function of your anatomy is way more solvable than some ominous acoustic sound that you're trapped here on Earth with. Finally, on a much more serious note, there is a whole side of this story that I've not researched or covered in this video, for good reason. I've talked to quite a few people who have been dragged to some really dark places as a result of being subjected to a sound that they don't want to hear anymore, or a vibration that they don't want to feel anymore. And I'll tell you one thing, it absolutely breaks my heart to know that people have taken their own lives or harmed themselves as a result or a reaction to this phenomenon. If this is bothering you enough, to some degree, this is almost certainly a solvable problem. And in the process of solving that problem, if you're communicating with others, you may be helping others through that problem. If you feel helpless about anything, pick up your phone and dial 988. And if you're outside of the United States, you'll likely have a similar service at your disposal. There's absolutely no shame in it. It exists for a reason. Everybody needs some help sometimes. And yeah, good talk. Data scientist, bad at emotional talking. I could probably spend the next hour trying to rattle off everybody who contributed tons of useful information to this project and video, and I would still come up short. If you're one of those people who answered my questions, or let me into your home, or helped me film, or watched my dog Lucy while I was traveling, or helped me find microslides, or shared your experiences with me in any way, thank you so much. And another phenomenon that you may have noticed, this video doesn't have a part where I talk about a VPN or a meal subscription thing that I'm trying to get you to buy. This video and this research was funded by YouTube, my Patreon members, and the rest is entirely out of pocket. I think I would need something like 60 million views for this video to break even. I'm very in the red, but that's okay, because if things balance out at the end of the year, then we've effectively found a way to fund research through this YouTube channel, and that's probably the coolest thing that I've ever heard. That being said, if you enjoyed this and you want to see more content like this, my Patreon includes a ton of audio resources on released music, an active and healthy Discord community, and a monthly songwriting challenge, and it's as little as $1. Thanks for watching, and whatever you do, keep creating. Bye.